All right, let's get ready to paint our portrait recreation. So I had screwed up on my proportions on my sheet, and I actually switched to a 12 by 16 sheet instead of a 12 by 18 to make sure everything is accurate. So I redid my drawing, made sure that everything was accurate, and then I am ready to begin to paint. Whenever you paint, you really want to start on any backgrounds and just any base and general colors, because you always build up from there. Your first coat is never your best coat. It's just to get a foundation built. It's like building a house. You want to start with that foundation, make it a good one, and you build up from there. And so this is where you use those outlines that you've already drawn out to see where you're going to paint and where you're not going to paint. It just kind of helps provide that guide for you. Now you're going to only be using your primary colors and your tints and your shades, so white and black, and then you're going to mix all your colors from there. If you don't remember how to mix a certain color, you can always use a color wheel to use as a guide. So for picking colors for your portrait, you can either go off of the original colors in the actual portrait. You could do something similar to it, but then maybe make a few other colors added in there, or you can do something totally different. So I do have an example that it is based on the original colors, but in this one I'm going to be doing an analogous color scheme. So I actually end up only needing blue, yellow, black, and white. I actually end up not even needing my red because I end up just doing different yellow greens and blues and blue greens, and just have every color in between there. I just thought it would kind of create a cool effect. Now every day, make sure that you are covering up your paint. It's only that when you have like a decent amount that the plastic will actually keep it from drying out. If it's thin, it's always going to dry out, and you just kind of work with it, okay? So I had done my background, I let things dry, and then I am doing another base coat now on the rest of my portrait. So notice how throughout I'm just getting general values and general colors. I'm not going to be going into too specifics because I'm going to be painting over this. I'm going to be adding more values. I'm going to be adding more details. So really I'm not worrying about any of those specific details. I just want to make sure that where it's supposed to be darker areas, I'm putting dark. Where it's supposed to be lighter, I'm putting lighter. And I just kind of keep building up from there. Sometimes you'll see that I mix my paint while it's on there. Sometimes you might screw up and then you just let it dry and you paint over. You kind of have a lot of flexibility with paint as long as you're taking your time and using it carefully and wisely. So as we're getting closer to the end of these base values, you can kind of see how I have some shadows represented from bluer areas versus the green, or just having it just generally darker. So you can kind of see how there's different ways to create shadows and to create highlights, because that value piece is still a very big piece of this project. So now it is time, since I have my base layers done, I'm going to go in and I'm going to continue adding into some of those values. So I look back at my portrait and I see where those highlights are, I see where the shadows are, and I'm going through and I'm adding those colors in as well. Sometimes you'll see throughout here too, and you'll find this in your own project, that sometimes the colors just change. Sometimes the color that you put down, you just don't love, or it just doesn't work in that area. you let it dry, or you just kind of mix another color into it, and you kind of keep making changes until it looks how you want it to look. So I wanted that contrast in that background there a little bit more. So I lightened up the color that I had there, and I darkened the shadows. And so it had a little bit more of that contrast so things pop out. And that's just making sure that you're applying, once again, that value into each of your areas, using those highlights, using those shadows to really bring your work to that next level. So originally with the base colors, I was kind of making sure that the skin tone was going to be lighter than the background. And so I did do that, which worked out. I mean, it was lighter, but I didn't love the color how it interacted with the rest of the piece. So what I ended up doing is that I actually just kind of ended up changing the color to be more of a blue-green, so that it actually ends up popping out a little bit more. I still have that white. I still have a little bit more of a tint to it, but I just want it to be a little bit bolder of a color so it stands out from that background, but also stands out from the hair. To add to that contrast between the sections, I go through and I actually make my hair just a little bit darker as well. And I actually did that by adding a touch of yellow to my blue, which I thought once again kind of richened that blue color for the hair, but it makes it pop against that background because it is darker, but really makes it pop and tie into the skin tone as well. So you should notice as we continue along here that in some areas I really am just building up those values so that it's a solid color and that you're not seeing through the paint, because that is not a quality portrait if you are being able to see through the paint. So I just kind of keep building up those values, keep building up colors, and kind of keep adding in little details here and there. So once you have areas that are dark, it's dark. Once you have areas that are light, light. Once you kind of have everything kind of blended how you want it generally, you go back in and you start to add those little details. Now, these are really tough to ignore right away, but it pays off. If you're trying to paint in some of these lines and then you're trying to paint around them, it is very, very difficult. So you really want to end with these and add any of those like final textures. These are the pieces that really help really amplify your project. Now, because the paint on the project is dry and I'm using a very light pressure paintbrush, you can see that it creates a nice little texture, nice little streaks. If you are trying to create that effect, that's what I do. It's really just being very light with the paintbrush. Now the eyes and the nose and the mouth and the ears, like these are the most difficult parts of a project. But if you look at your portrait and you look at the photo and you look at the actual shape, not what we think, because we always think that eyes are ovals, which they are, but look at the shape. Is it a little bit more closed? Is it a little bit more open? Is it curved more on the bottom? Is it curved more on the top? What does the shape actually look like? Pay attention to those little details, and those are the things that once again bring your project to life and really kind of amplify it. Now with some of these details that I am kind of adding in here, I want them to be a little bit more subtle. So I actually am watering them down. Early on when you're trying to build those foundations, you really want to make sure that the paint is good and solid. But as you're adding details on top, watering it down helps create this nice glazed effect is what I was taught that it's called. And it does create a very soft, but still bold impact depending on the shades that you're using. And that's what I do a lot with these finishing touches. So as I'm looking at the piece as a whole, I just feel like my person and my monkey and my background all don't really flow together very well. So what I end up doing is I take just a little bit of yellow, which is a pretty see-through color, and I kind of just do little streaks here and there to kind of add in and amplify textures in the background, but also I use it to tie in to my actual project. It's kind of just a style that I've found that I really like it with my paintings. I don't like to make things that are overly realistic, and I just like to make those little subtle, fun, happy, I guess, color accents throughout your project. So that's kind of what I have found for my style, and I found that it kind of helps unify the entire project. So find yours, explore your options. If you screw up, let it dry, paint over, and best of luck. You got this.